Hello, everyone. You are watching or listening to the Grounded Apologetics for Teens Digging Deeper podcast, and I am your host, Abby Holman. If you're unfamiliar with my channel, I make short videos, roughly 3 to 5 minutes long, explaining theological and apologetics concepts. So it's just a brief introduction. It's not very in-depth. It's just trying to give you a taste, get your toes wet into apologetics and philosophy and theology and those types of things. But if you want to learn a little bit more, if you want to go a little bit deeper, then you're in the right place, because that is the purpose of these Digging Deeper podcasts. It's to mention some things that I didn't get to mention in my short videos for the sake of time, or because I didn't feel like I could explain it very well in that amount of time. It's to kind of go into a little more depth and a little more detail and just kind of dig a little bit deeper. So I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you're watching, and I really appreciate you watching, because that really is very helpful for me. It helps me extend my reach a little bit more and spread my reach on whatever platform you are watching or listening on. And my goal was never to grow a YouTube channel. It's not to gain subscribers or make a profit out of this or anything like that. It's not that at all. My goal is to equip young people to defend their faith and to be able to respond to the challenges that culture is going to throw at us in this day and age. And I can do that effectively by spreading my reach a little bit more on the platforms that I'm on. And so you watching and listening and liking my videos and subscribing to me, if you like this content, that really, really helps. It really helps me to extend my reach. And it's such a blessing for me to be able to see the reach that I do have. Like, I got a comment on one of my videos from a youth pastor in Utah who was using some of my videos for his youth service. And that was just so cool to see. That was such a blessing for me, because I see that my work is actually paying off. It's actually making a difference. It's actually helping people. And that's just such a blessing for me to see. So one of the ways that you can help me is by asking questions. That's actually not annoying to me at all. It doesn't bother me at all. I actually appreciate that. And if you want to ask a question, you can comment on my videos on YouTube, or you can email me using the email address groundedaft@gmail.com, which will also be in the description below if you need to look at it. And asking those questions will just help me to provide content. So I would like to have a Q&A section in this podcast to where I can just answer those questions. And that would help me to provide content for you, and might help other people who want to ask the same questions that you have. And that will just kind of help the channel out a lot. So if you would do that, that would actually be really helpful, and I would really enjoy that. So the first podcast episode, I went for a very, very practical approach. So I shared a little bit about my struggle in evangelism and apologetics, the things that I face when I do things like that, when I try to witness. And I went for a very, very practical and vulnerable approach. And then the second one, it was all information. It was all philosophy. So it was just kind of throwing information at you. And I know that was a lot, because not everybody enjoys that. A lot of people told me that, they didn't really enjoy that as much as the practical side. So I'm trying going forward to have a mix of both. So I want to have both the philosophical side, both the information side, give you a little bit of knowledge to equip yourself with, and the practical side and the applicable side, because that will be really, really helpful to put into practice when you're actually in those scenarios, So in this episode, that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to have both a philosophical side and a practical side, but they're going to stem from the same experience. And that experience for me was a conversation that I had with my philosophy professor last year. So I was taking college courses over the summer, and I took this really short online philosophy course. And in this course, we had a unit that was on the philosophy of religion. And in every unit, for every lesson, you had to post on this online discussion forum. And the professor would always respond to your posts. So during the unit of philosophy of religion, I posted about the problem of evil and the existence of God based on morality. And I got into this discussion with my philosophy professor about morality and the existence of God. And it was a really, really cool discussion, because I got to put some apologetics knowledge into play. Even though he probably already knew that, he probably had already heard that argument before, he was a philosophy professor, it was still cool for me because I got to put that knowledge into action. So we got to talking about morality, about the existence of God, and the class was almost over. It was a really short course. I think this was like the last time that I logged into it, and I looked at this conversation that we'd been having, and he had mentioned this argument against Christianity. He just kind of referenced it, called Euthyphro's dilemma. And I had never heard of it before, and I didn't know how to respond to that. And I didn't actually respond because the course had ended and I had moved on and all of that. But I wanted to look up Euthyphro's dilemma and learn about it so that if I was ever faced with that again, I would be able to respond. I would be able to answer that and provide a response to that because I want to know how to respond to everything, right? So I looked up Euthyphro's dilemma and researched it so that I would be able to respond in the future. So 2 points that I want to make. First, I want to tell you what Euthyphro's dilemma is and explain that so that you know how to respond. And I want to show you what to do in those scenarios when you don't know how to respond, because I didn't know how to respond. I was completely ill-equipped to respond to that, and I didn't. Well, for many reasons, because the course had ended and all of that. But I kind of want to equip you to know what to do when you can't respond from a practical approach. So that will be the practical approach. But first, Euthyphro's dilemma. It's a lot, so hang tight, because it's going to be a lot of information. A dilemma argument, generally speaking, is a form of a logical argument, okay? So it's a type of logical argument. And basically what you do in a dilemma argument is you present to your opponent two negative options. So two alternatives, two options that are both negative and both hurt your opponent's argument, okay? So you say basically either you have option A or you have option B. There's no other options. And in either case, you're wrong. In either case, you've lost the argument. That's basically what a dilemma argument is. And it's so hard to respond to. I've heard it said that if you have mastery over the dilemma argument, if you know how to effectively use the dilemma argument, you basically have a black belt in reasoning. You have a black belt in logical reasoning and in debating, because that's how hard it is to respond to a dilemma. So you give two negative options which both hurt your opponent's argument, and you say you have no way around this. If you choose this way, you're wrong. If you choose this way, you're also wrong. There's no third option. There's no other way around this dilemma. So Euthyphro's dilemma is a very specific dilemma that is an attempt to show Christians that our understanding of God cannot exist. How so? Where does Euthyphro's dilemma come from? Euthyphro's dilemma comes from a question that was asked in ancient Greek. And I don't remember if Euthyphro was the one asking the question or if Euthyphro was asked the question. I'm not really sure. But the question that was asked was, is it pious because the gods love it? Or do the gods love it because it is pious? What the heck does that mean? Well, in modern language, as it applies to Christianity, that means option one, God created morality. It's pious because God loves it, because God says it is. It's morally right because God said so. So in this scenario, you have morality as a law that God created, that he is not obligated to follow. He has no moral obligation to adhere to this law because he created it, just like science. Like he doesn't have to follow the laws of science just because he created them. He can defy science. So you have morality created by God. It had a beginning, so morality has not always existed. And God, that's the negative outcome of this, is God is not intrinsically good. Well, that's a problem because that is not what Christians believe. That's contrary to our faith. And so this option clearly cannot be true because it is showing something negative, right? So then you have the second option. Is it pious? Do the gods love it because it is pious? In this case, you have God says something is moral, not because he created morality, but because morality is a standard that is higher than God. That's also a problem. That's morality is a law above him that he is obligated to. So in the first case, you have God is stripped of his goodness. He is not intrinsically moral. And in the second case, you have God is stripped of his sovereignty because there cannot be anything higher than God. That ruins the whole point. Like we said, morality is a high standard, and it has to have a being to which you are obligated, right? So if God is obligated to something higher than himself, he can't be God. That's the whole point. So that does not work. So in the first option, God is stripped of his goodness, and in the second option, God is stripped of his sovereignty. So neither of those options can be right, and that's the goal of Euthyphro's dilemma, is saying, well, you've got two options, and both of them, your argument fails. And both of them, your religion is false. And that's the goal of Euthyphro's dilemma, is to tell us that our idea of God cannot be true, because either he is not good, option A, or he is not sovereign, option B. Well, how do we respond to that? What's the answer? How do we get past Euthyphro's dilemma? How do we escape these two options? Well, there's two ways that you can respond to a dilemma argument. The first way is to show that one of the options is actually good. It's actually positive. It's not negative. We can't do that. Both of these options are negative. The second way to respond to a dilemma argument is to show that there is a third option. Okay, so I'm refusing either option. I'm saying I'm not picking either of those. I'm going to choose a third option. And what is that third option? It's going to blow your mind. It's really cool, okay? If you don't learn anything about Euthyphro's dilemma, if nothing that I said just now makes sense, this is what I want you to get. This is the important part. Morality flows from the very nature and character of God. It is his personality. It is not a law that is higher than him to which he is obligated, and it is not a law that he created to which he is not obligated. It's his very nature and character. Why is he obligated to it? Why is he morally good? Because he can't deny himself. He can't deny his own nature. He can't deny his own character. He can't go against his own standards. He can't do that. So he is obligated to it. He is intrinsically good, but he still is sovereign because he is not responding to anything higher than him. He's not obligated to anything higher than him because there is nothing higher to him because he is God. So in that scenario, if morality is the very nature and character of God, he can still be intrinsically good and he can still be sovereign. And you have both of those things coexisting together because morality flows from God's nature. And that's just so cool to me. God is the standard. There's no standard higher than him. It's not a standard that he created and arbitrarily enforces on us. It is his very nature and character. And this concept is actually reflected in the Bible. The Bible talks about, I don't remember where exactly, but the Bible talks about God swearing by himself because there's nothing higher for him to swear by. When people swore by something in the Bible times, they would take an oath on something, like, I swear by the Lord that I will do this and this. And what they're doing is they're saying, I am obligated to this being that is higher than me, to this thing that is higher than me, and I'm obligated that I'm going to fulfill this vow. I'm obligated to complete this oath that I have promised, that I have sworn. And so what God was doing is he swore by himself because there's nothing higher than him. So he is obligated to himself, which is exactly the point that I'm making. God is obligated to no one higher than him at all. He's obligated to no one except his own nature, because that is where morality comes from. And that is just so cool to me. I think that it's absolutely beautiful. And again, if you don't understand any of the gibberish that I just spat out at you about Euthyphro's dilemma, this is what I want you to get. This is what I want you to leave with, because this is just really cool to me. So moving on. We can move on from the philosophical side, because I'm sure your brain hurts. Mine does too. And this is the practical side now, okay? So I didn't know how to respond in that scenario. I had never heard of Euthyphro's dilemma. I didn't know how to respond, and I didn't respond for various reasons that I already mentioned. But what should you do when you can't respond? Well, the first thing you should do is educate yourself. You can take advantage of that opportunity to learn more about that thing that you couldn't respond to. So that's what I did. I looked up Euthyphro's dilemma, I studied it, I learned how to respond to it, and I keep it in my back pocket now. As I just gave this whole spiel to you about Euthyphro's dilemma, you know that I know how to respond to it now. The second thing you can do is take advantage of that opportunity to give yourself more opportunities to witness to that person. What does that look like? So if I'm having a conversation with a coworker and they give something to me that I don't know how to respond to in that moment, well, I can say, I don't really know the answer to that now, but do you want to grab coffee and talk about it some other time? So what am I doing? I'm giving myself another opportunity for me to witness to that person. I'm creating more opportunities for me to do that. And that's just kind of extending that conversation. So instead of backing down and saying, I don't know the answer to that, you're saying, well, I'm going to try to find an answer for you, and we're going to talk about it another time. The third thing you can do is use Columbo question, right? You always have to come back to Columbo question to get to know that person more. So if they give something to you, if they give you an argument that you don't know how to answer, maybe you can take advantage of that to get to know them more, to ask questions about why they think that, why they believe that, where that comes from, why they pose that question to you, why they pose that argument to you. And that helps you get to know the person more and just kind of break down some boundaries and be more personable to them. And the fourth thing is you can be vulnerable. You don't have to know all the answers. And this is really hard for me because I want to know all the answers. I want to be articulate. I want to be well-spoken. I want to be confident, or at least act confident, act like I know all the answers to everything. And I feel like that's going to help me win the argument. That's going to help me move forward. And in reality, that attitude is actually just going to make people more defensive. It's going to make people less responsive to the gospel if you're acting in that way. And that's something that I have to grow in because I always have a debating mindset. I always have a to the point, I'm right, you're wrong mindset. And really, that's not how you should be approaching it. You should be approaching it as being vulnerable, as being personable, as being honest. And so even if you have to say, I don't really know the answer to that, but can we talk about Jesus? I don't really know the answer to what you're saying, but could we talk about, the resurrection? Could we talk about this? Or could we go sit down and have coffee and maybe I'll try to find an answer for you. Maybe I won't. Maybe I will. You never know. But you're being vulnerable and you're being honest. And that actually helps to reach that person's heart and not just their mind, right? That actually helps to break down some boundaries, to break down some barriers with that person and just witness to them a little bit better. And so that might actually be how you should respond to them. And you don't have to always know the answers. You don't always have to be super articulate and well-spoken. You can just minister to that person as an individual. So, philosophical side, Euthyphro's dilemma. You know how to respond now, hopefully, if you made sense of all the gibberish that I spat at you. And the practical side, be vulnerable, be honest, take advantage of those opportunities where you don't know the answers to get an opportunity to witness further, to get an opportunity to minister to that person and not just respond to their arguments. You don't always have to know all the answers, right? So that's the philosophical side and that's the practical side. I hope you got something from that. I hope that made sense. I hope that gibberish didn't just clog up your brain. And that's that. And that's the podcast number 3. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got something from it. And I will see you next time.